Hello and welcome to another Official Watches YouTube video. Here at Jardin du Mayfair, I have something really cool to show you today. First, if I could just ask you politely, please do hit that subscribe button. Up to 90% of my viewers aren't subscribed, and it would really help me if you hit subscribe. I'll keep these videos coming fresh and hot every week. So without further ado, what do I have today? I have none other than the new release, the Rolex 1908 in yellow gold with the white dial. Released with not much fanfare because we were all too slack-jawed looking at the puzzle dial in 2023, which if you haven't seen my review on, go check that out. The new Rolex 1908 range replaces the outgoing Cellini and is positioned to offer the brand's dress watch option. Although I'm an admittedly huge fan of the professional range, the Crown played a blinder back in the 1960s when their marketing man of the hour, Paul Jeanneret, began to float the idea that perhaps one Rolex just wasn't enough. He suggested that while buyers, of course, should be buying tool watches from the brand, they also should consider another Rolex for formal purposes. In short, one was not enough for the average man. You needed a workhorse and a show pony, and the Cellini line was ready and waiting to fill the formal watch spot for those inclined to build a collection to cover all bases. The premise in the intervening 60 years has remained very much the same, but as the interest in steel do-it-all pieces was rising, the world became more casual. The dedication to precious metal formal watches waned, as did the popularity of the Cellini. As style always ebbs and flows, interest in dress pieces had picked up again, alongside the rise in vintage re-editions and dapper watches for the discerning Don Drapers around town. So it comes as no real surprise that Rolex has retired the aging Cellini in favour of a new, refreshed range of classical pieces in the form of the 1908, which was named after the founding year of the brand. Being honest here, as a die-hard steel sportswearer, I wasn't sure I'd be overly enamoured with a gold dress watch, as it's a little like introducing a manicure to a bricklayer. But actually, and quite surprisingly, now I've got to know it, I kind of want it. So far, the 1908 collection is capsule and comprises of 4 identical watches in different combinations. 18-karat white or yellow gold with black or white dial options. Now, if you know me and watch these videos, it would always be the white dial for me. This one is the reference 52508, the yellow gold with white dial variant. Now, one of the interesting things I found about it straight off the bat is that the tone of the gold is softer and, dare I say, infinitely more subtle than the Aloha yellow that I'm used to seeing on the likes of the Daytona. I'm not sure if Rolex has been up to some alchemy in their foundry or whether the slimness and simplicity of the design just calms down the gold overall, but nonetheless, it's noticeably easier on the eye. Equally easy on the eye is the dial, which is said to be based on a 1930s model from their back catalogue. Not surprising, in my humble opinion, it is the piece de resistance on the watch. Utterly simple and functional, yet somehow far from dull. Now, firstly, it isn't a jarring or a bright block colour. It's almost an opaline white, which has soft sheen to it. Rolex says it's created by a process called magnetron sputtering. Now, the phrase immediately put me in the mind of the X-Men throwing a tantrum, but having done some research, it means a type of physical vapor deposition, which creates a film or a coating that is applied using magnetic fields to control the spread of charged ion particles. Presumably, in this case, the application of off-white paint that has just enough texture to capture reflections and light play incredibly well. The rather lovely sputtered dial is topped off with a decidedly vintage black railroad minute track around both the outer edge of the dial, and the same is found around the small seconds at 6. Now, before we keep going, let's get it out and have a little look, because I can't resist. The first time that I saw this watch, it was actually through 3 feet thick display glass at Watches and Wonders. If you haven't seen that video, check that one out at the end. It's a really good video, if I don't mind saying so myself. So when I saw it, I did like it, but I admit that it isn't my style of watch. However, now I've got it in hand, I've realised that for the money, this is a really cool dress piece, if that's what you're looking for. Also, it could be worn on the weekends. I'm thinking of a linen shirt and maybe a pair of Tods. So, back to the dial, which is my favourite thing about the piece. The applied indices are a mix of batten and Arabics for the 3, 9 and 12, which are made from polished 18 karat gold. Up close with a loop, they are finished exceptionally well, and due to their elevation cast some really subtle but incredibly charming shadows, which contribute to the dial being classic but with enough twists to keep a modern wearer entertained. The dial even sports the open 9, which is beloved of vintage watch collectors who tend to play spot the open 6 and 9s on the date wheels of their vintage Rolexes. What a touch! The polished handset is suitably old world with zero lume and an observatory style hour hand. The ridge down the centre of each hand catches the light extremely well, making it very easy to read in all but the darkest conditions. The handset is also capped, which rather speaks to the level of finishing that's going on here from the crown. The case is 39mm with a lug to lug of 47mm. It's fully polished with a half-domed, half-fluted bezel. A hybrid that I'd never really considered but now rate quite highly as it adds both texture and shine without being overbearing or out of place. The 1908 wears closer to a 40mm due to its slim bezel and simplicity, but it does not in any way suffer from the dinner plate effect. There is enough detail on the dial to prevent it from becoming an expanse of white that overbears the case, and the size works because the watch is only 9.5mm in height. Its proportions are spot on for a classic dress watch, despite being larger than its predecessors of the 30s and 40s. It also feels like a Rolex, which is an odd thing to say, but when you're accustomed to handling dress watches that are almost delicate in their refinement, it's reassuring to note that this watch feels as robust and as capable as a Datejust. Now, as this is a dress piece, a sapphire caseback is in position, giving you a view of the Rolex automatic caliber 7140, which offers bang up-to-date silicone hairspring and Paraflex shock absorbers, as well as a 66-hour power reserve. Yeah, you heard that right, 66-hour power reserve, with a level of finishing that makes it perfectly at home on display. It's also a superlative chronometer and it's accurate to +2, -2 seconds per day. Its strap is brown alligator with signature green lining and a folding clasp rather than a buckle. Folding clasps tend to extend the longevity of straps because you're not constantly flexing it to thread through a buckle. Neither are you stretching the holes with constant use, so it will stay nice and fresh. Now, while I do really like the clasp, I do find alligator to be quite formal, so if you wanted, you could whip it off in favour of something a little more at home in a casual setting. But the truth is, like with most Rolexes, it's probably best just kept as it is. Now, bringing the review to a close, I've found very little to gripe with, which is virtually unheard of with me and dress watches. I don't even mind that it's got 50 metres water resistance because the truth is that's plenty enough for a watch of this type. I suppose if I was to be hypercritical, which I'm actually not that inclined to be, as the 1908 has won me over, I would say that while the main hands have been capped, the second hands has not. So there is a disparity in the finishing there. That said, this level of detail is so small that it does pass unnoticed, and all in, while I can never see myself being dragged away from my beloved yet entirely predictable sports watches, the 1908 has really made me aware of Rolex's ability to create a zero hype watch that is really just as good as its fabulous stablemates. This watch is £23,000, and actually, if you think about dress watches and the prices associated with them, certainly looking at Patek and stuff like that, this is a real bargain, because for what you get, it's a lot of watch. Guys, as always, the best bit is hearing what you think about the watch, so please do leave me a comment below. Is the 1908 the coolest Rolex dress watch? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me here at Jardin du Mayfair, heaven on earth for the watch enthusiast. I hope you've enjoyed this week's 1908 review. Please do hit subscribe and I'll keep these videos coming fresh and hot every week.